In a luxurious penthouse overlooking Central Park, where New York's elite gather to toast the new year, 26-year-old crisis strategist Arielle Monroe walks in wearing a gold sequin dress and a secret in her eyes. Married for 4 years to powerful CEO Victor Langford, 46, a charismatic and ruthless man in both business and discreet affairs, Arielle learned long ago that appearances can lie, but facts never do. Victor thought he had her under control, until, as the clock struck midnight, he quietly kissed another woman. What he didn't expect was that Arielle had also brought a date, Julian Cross, 38, the lawyer. Keep watching to find out how Arielle rewrote her story, one scandal at a time. And don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable tales of revenge, power, and liberation. Chapter 1. The Reckoning. The Manhattan skyline glittered like a jewelry box against the inky December sky. From the penthouse terrace of the Langford Tower, the city's heartbeat seemed distant yet palpable, a symphony of ambition and restlessness. Snowflakes danced lazily in the cold air, melting on contact with the heated floors of the rooftop venue where New York's elite had gathered to welcome another year of privilege. Arielle Monroe Langford stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a flute of untouched champagne in her manicured hand. At 26, she possessed a quiet confidence that made people twice her age pause mid-sentence. Her honey-blonde hair was swept into an elegant updo, revealing a slender neck adorned with a single diamond pendant, Victor's first gift to her, before the promises started breaking like fine china. The golden sequins of her dress caught the light with every subtle movement, creating the illusion that she was perpetually in motion even when standing perfectly still. But it was her eyes, amber with flecks of green, that told the real story, calculating, patient, and tonight, unusually determined. "Arielle, darling, you're positively glowing," cooed Margaret Winthrop, the 70-year-old matriarch of Manhattan's old money, her voice carrying the raspy evidence of decades of expensive cigarettes and strong opinions. Arielle's smile was practiced perfection. "Marriage is full of surprises, isn't it, Margaret?" "Oh, indeed. Speaking of which, who is that delicious man you arrived with? Certainly not your type." Margaret's eyes drifted across the room to where Julian Cross stood in conversation with the city's comptroller. Julian was everything Victor wasn't: lean where Victor was broad, understated where Victor was ostentatious. His charcoal suit was impeccably tailored, his dark hair showing distinguished touches of silver at the temples. At 38, he had the confident ease of someone who had built his reputation on substance rather than showmanship. "Julian? He's counsel for Meridian Industries," Arielle said casually, knowing that Margaret would immediately recognize the name of Victor's biggest corporate rival. "We ran into each other at the charity auction last week." Margaret's eyebrows shot up so dramatically that her recent Botox treatments strained to contain them. My. And Victor approved of your friendship?" "Victor believes I don't notice things," Arielle replied, her voice steady, despite the emotion bubbling beneath the surface. That's always been his biggest mistake. Across the room, Victor Langford commanded attention the way he commanded everything, with practiced charm and unshakable conviction in his own exceptionalism. At 46, he still maintained the physique of a former college athlete, his salt and pepper hair cropped short in a style that made him look perpetually ready for a board meeting or a magazine cover. The clean energy market isn't just about environmental consciousness anymore. It's about being ahead of regulatory curves. Langford Enterprises positioned itself precisely where federal subsidies would flow. Call it foresight, call it luck. He flashed his trademark smile, all perfect teeth and calculated warmth. But our shareholders call it a 22% return. Laughter rippled around him. Victor thrived on adoration, collecting admirers like trophies. Arielle had once been the brightest in his collection, the brilliant Northwestern graduate who could decode media narratives and craft counter-strategies before most people had processed the crisis. Her ability to predict public reaction had saved Langford Enterprises from PR disasters numerous times. But tonight, Victor had no idea what was coming. Arielle watched as Sophia Chen, the newly appointed creative director at Victor's company, subtly touched his arm while laughing at something he'd said. Sophia was striking in a crimson dress that seemed painted onto her slender frame, her black hair cascading down her back. "He always did have a type," Julian said quietly, appearing at Arielle's side with a fresh glass of champagne. "Intelligent women who make him look good until he decides they're overshadowing him." Arielle accepted the champagne, her fingers brushing against Julian's momentarily. "That's why I chose you for tonight. You've never been intimidated by him." Julian's dark eyes met hers with an intensity that had nothing to do with business rivalry. "I've been waiting for your call for months, ever since you contacted my office. I needed irrefutable evidence, and I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with." The party had reached that lively pitch just before midnight, when anticipation blends with alcohol to create a buoyant euphoria. The live band transitioned into a slower number, and couples gravitated toward each other on the dance floor. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're 3 minutes from midnight. Grab your loved ones and your champagne." Victor excused himself from his circle, making a show of scanning the room for Arielle, when his eyes found her, standing far closer to Julian Cross than propriety would suggest. A flicker of annoyance crossed his features before being replaced by his public smile. He began moving toward her, but Sophia intercepted him, her hand on his chest in a gesture too intimate to be coincidental. Victor hesitated, then leaned down to whisper something in her ear that made her laugh. 1 minute to midnight, came the announcement. Arielle turned to Julian. "He thinks I'm still that naive girl from 4 years ago, the one who believed his excuses about late meetings and business trips." "You never were that girl," Julian said softly. "That's why he worked so hard to make you doubt yourself." The countdown began. The crowd chanted in unison, 10, 9, 8. Victor had positioned himself strategically, close enough to reach Arielle when it mattered, but still engaged in animated conversation with Sophia. 7, 6, 5. Arielle's heartbeat accelerated, not from anxiety, but from the pure adrenaline of finally acting on a plan months in the making. 4, 3. Victor made his calculated move toward Arielle, but as he did, his hand remained on Sophia's waist. 2, 1. "Happy New Year!" As confetti rained down and Auld Lang Syne filled the air, Victor turned, not toward his wife, but to Sophia. Their kiss was brief but unmistakable. When he pulled away, his eyes darted to locate Arielle, expecting to find her pretending to not have seen. Instead, he watched as his wife, golden and luminous in the celebration lights, reached up and pulled Julian Cross down into a kiss that left nothing to interpretation. It wasn't a peck. It was a declaration. Julian's hands found her waist, and for several long seconds they were the only two people in a room full of gasping socialites. When they finally separated, Arielle's eyes locked with Victor's across the room. The look they exchanged was electric, his of shock and outrage, hers of cold, calculated triumph. From his jacket pocket, Julian produced an envelope, which he handed to his server with instructions. The young man nodded and made his way directly to Victor, offering the envelope on a silver tray. Victor's hands shook slightly as he tore it open. His face, usually so controlled, drained of color as he read the contents. Arielle raised her champagne glass in a mock toast. Even from across the room, Victor could read her lips as she mouthed, "You underestimated the wrong woman, Victor, and I don't forgive quietly." If you're captivated by Arielle's moment reckoning and want to see how Victor responds to being outmaneuvered by the wife he thought he controlled, hit that subscribe button now. The next chapter reveals the shocking fallout from this New Year's confrontation and the secret Arielle has been gathering for months. Don't miss a single moment of this story about a woman who decided her worth wasn't negotiable. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and join thousands of viewers who are already asking, what exactly was in that envelope and what happens next? Chapter 2, The Revelation. The Lankford penthouse on Fifth Avenue overlooks Central Park like a fortress surveying its domain. Floor-to-ceiling windows captured the winter sunrise, painting the minimalist white furniture in shades of pink and gold. It was a space designed for magazine features, not for comfort, not for warmth, but for immaculate impression. Arielle stood in the master bedroom, methodically packing a selection of clothes into an expensive leather weekend bag. Her movements were precise, unhurried. The bedroom, like every room in the penthouse, was a study of controlled opulence. Egyptian cotton sheets in pristine white, abstract art in muted tones that cost more than most people's annual salary. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the apartment. Victor's footsteps, heavy, purposeful, approached the bedroom. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice was dangerously quiet as he appeared in the doorway. He'd loosened his tie, and his usually perfect hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. Arielle didn't look up from her packing. I believe the legal documents explained it quite clearly. A divorce petition? On our New Year's party? In front of everyone who matters in this city? Victor's composure was cracking. The veneer of the charismatic business leader was giving way to something uglier. And with Julian Cross, of all people, do you have any idea what you've done to my reputation? Now, Arielle looked up, her amber eyes cool. Your reputation was built on a foundation of lies, Victor. I simply removed one brick. Victor moved closer, his physical presence filling the room in the way that once impressed her, had once made her feel protected rather than cornered. This is about Sophia? That was nothing. A moment of holiday indiscretion. He switched tactics, his voice softening. Arielle, come on. We've built something significant together. Your career has flourished because of our partnership. My career has flourished despite your attempts to contain it, she corrected him, zipping her bag closed. And no, this isn't about Sophia. She's just the latest in a pattern that started before our honeymoon was even over. Victor's expression darkened. What are you talking about? Arielle walked to the built-in safe, hidden behind an abstract painting. She entered the combination, not the one Victor had given her, but the actual code she'd observed him using when he thought she wasn't paying attention. The thing about being underestimated, she said as she opened the safe, is that people get careless around you. They speak freely, leave things in plain sight, forget you're even in the room sometimes. From the safe, she removed a thumb drive, holding it up between two fingers. 2 years of documented infidelities, Victor. Bank statements showing transfers to shell companies that funneled money back to personal accounts in the Caymans. Emails discussing the deliberate suppression of safety reports for the Westlake Development Project. Victor's face went from angry to ashen. You're bluffing. The beauty of being a crisis strategist is understanding how information flows. People trust me to fix problems, which means they show me where the bodies are buried. She slipped the thumb drive into her jacket pocket. Copies of everything are already with Julian's firm, with instructions to release them if anything happens to me. Additional copies are with the SEC, pending my final confirmation. Victor lunged forward, his hand closing around her wrist with bruising intensity. You little bitch. I made you. You were nothing when we met. A scholarship kid with a community college degree and delusions of grandeur. For the first time, Arielle's composure wavered, not from fear, but from a surge of pure, clarifying anger. Northwestern University, summa cum laude, Victor. Not that you ever bothered to get it right. And I made myself, long before you came along with your promises and your wandering hands. Their faces were inches apart now, his contorted with rage, hers flushed with the liberation of finally speaking her truth. You never loved me, she said, the realization settling into her bones. You collected me, like your art, your cars, your vacation properties. I was just another acquisition that enhanced your image. "And what about Julian?" Victor snarled. "You think he wants you for your mind? He's using you to get to me, to Langford Enterprises." Arielle twisted her wrist free from his grip. "The difference is, I know exactly what Julian wants, and I've made my own decisions with my eyes wide open." She picked up her bag, moving toward the door. "The divorce papers outline a settlement that's more than fair, considering what I could demand with the evidence I have." Victor followed her, his voice rising. "If you think I'm going to roll over and let you walk away with half of what I've built—" "I don't want half of what you've built," Arielle cut him off, turning to face him one last time. "Sign the papers, Victor, by tomorrow, or the next documents filed will be with federal prosecutors." In the marble-floored foyer, she paused before a gilded mirror, checking her appearance. Not out of vanity, but out of habit formed from years of Victor's critical gaze. Her reflection showed someone both familiar and strange. The same features, but somehow sharper, more defined, as if a soft focus lens had been removed. Victor appeared behind her in the mirror's reflection, his imposing frame diminished somehow by the truth laid bare between them. "Where are you going?" he demanded, his voice hoarse. "That's no longer your concern." She reached for the door. "Arielle." Something in his tone made her pause. Not guilt, not nostalgia, but recognition of the fundamental shift in power between them. "What happened? When did you start planning this?" She turned, her hand still on the doorknob. "Remember last spring? The charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum?" Victor frowned, clearly searching his memory. "You were sitting with the mayor, and I overheard you tell him I was decorative but not particularly substantial." Arielle's smile was sad, but determined. "That was the moment I stopped crying over what I couldn't change and started planning for what I could." "It was a joke," Victor protested, but weakly. "The kind of thing men say." "The kind of thing insecure men say about women they fear," Arielle corrected. "And that fear told me everything I needed to know about how much power I actually had." She opened the door, stepping into the hallway where the private elevator waited. "Goodbye, Victor. I suggest you call your lawyer. You're going to need one who specializes in both divorce and securities fraud." As the elevator doors closed between them, Arielle saw something she'd never witnessed before. Victor Langford, master of his universe, looking utterly lost. In the marble lobby of the building, Julian waited, his lean frame a study in contained energy. When he saw her emerge from the elevator, relief washed over his features. "Everything okay?" he asked, taking her bag. Arielle exhaled, feeling the weight of performance finally lifting from her shoulders. He didn't believe I'd actually leave, even now, with everything laid out in front of him. Julian's hand found the small of her back as they walked toward the revolving doors. Men like Victor can't conceive of a world where they don't get what they want. Outside, Manhattan was transforming under a gentle snowfall. The morning light diffused through clouds to create a dreamlike glow. A sleek black car waited at the curb, its driver standing attentively beside the open rear door. "Where to?" Julian asked as they settled into the leather back seat. Arielle looked out at the city, the same skyline she'd gazed upon countless times, but now with new eyes. For the first time in years, the future wasn't mapped out in Victor's 5-year plans and strategic acquisitions. It was unwritten, uncertain, and entirely hers. "The plaza for now," she decided. "I need neutral ground while I figure out my next move." As the car pulled away from the curb, Arielle allowed herself one glance back at the building that had been her gilded cage. In the penthouse windows, she thought she could make out Victor's silhouette, watching her departure. Julian followed her gaze. "He won't give up easily. Men like him never do." "I'm counting on it," Arielle replied, her voice steady, "because I've prepared for every scenario, including the worst ones." Julian studied her with newfound appreciation. "You know, when you first contacted my firm 6 months ago, I thought you were just another trophy wife looking for leverage in a prenup battle." "And now," she turned to face him, aware of the narrow space between them in the back seat, of the lingering chemistry from their staged, but not entirely staged, kiss the night before. Now, I think Victor Langford never had a chance. Julian's smile held equal parts admiration and something more complex. The question is, what does Arielle Monroe want now that she's free? Arielle considered the question, watching the familiar streets of her adopted city slide past the window. First, justice, then rebuilding. Beyond that, she met Julian's gaze directly. I'm still deciding. The car turned onto Central Park South, where the plaza stood as it had for over a century, a testament to enduring elegance amid constant change. Much like Arielle herself, it had weathered transitions and transformations while maintaining its essential character. Well, Julian said as the car came to a stop, I have a feeling the world isn't ready for Arielle Monroe unleashed. For the first time that day, perhaps the first time in months, Arielle laughed, a genuine sound that surprised even her. Good, she said. Element of surprise has always been my favorite strategy. Chapter 3. The Redemption. 3 months later, spring had begun to transform Manhattan. Cherry blossoms dotted Central Park in explosions of pink and white, and the air carried that particular New York blend of possibility and renewal. Midtown hummed with energy as Arielle navigated the crowded sidewalk, her phone pressed to her ear. No, I need the statement to emphasize resilience, not victimhood, she instructed, weaving between pedestrians with the practiced ease of a longtime New Yorker. At 36 stories, the glass and steel edifice of the Cross and Meridian building reflected the April sunshine, creating prisms of light on the surrounding pavement. In the months since New Year's Eve, Arielle had transformed more than just her marital status. Gone was the carefully cultivated image of Victor Langford's elegant accessory. In her place stood a woman whose wardrobe now favored structured blazers over cocktail dresses, whose honey blonde hair was cut into a sophisticated bob that framed her face in a way that demanded to be taken seriously.
The security guard in the lobby nodded in recognition as she passed. Morning, Miss Monroe. Morning, Dave. Kids feeling better? She remembered details about people, not as a calculated tactic the way Victor did, but out of genuine interest. Much better. Thanks for asking. Mr. Cross is already in the conference room. The elevator whisked her to the 30th floor, where the newly established Monroe Strategic Communications occupied the East Wing. Julian had offered her space in his firm's building when she decided to launch her own crisis management company rather than join another corporate giant. It wasn't charity. Her reputation had only grown since the public implosion of her marriage, with clients specifically seeking her expertise in navigating complex public relations challenges. When the elevator doors opened, she was greeted by the sight of her small but growing team gathered around a monitor, expressions intense. He's doing it again, said Maya, her 24-year-old associate, without looking up. Live on CNBC. Arielle moved closer to see Victor's face filling the screen. 3 months had aged him in ways that exceeded mere time. New lines around his eyes, a certain hollowness to his cheeks. But his voice retained that smooth, practiced conviction that had once charmed investors and romantic partners alike. Langford Enterprises remains at the forefront of sustainable development. Despite recent restructuring, our core vision remains unchanged. Mr. Langford, the interviewer pressed, you've lost 3 major investors since the SEC investigation began. How do you respond to allegations that safety reports were deliberately falsified for the Westlake project? Victor's smile tightened. Those allegations are categorically false. As I've stated repeatedly, any irregularities were the work of mid-level employees acting without executive knowledge. Arielle shook her head, still throwing subordinates under the bus. Some things never change. The SEC doesn't seem convinced, Maya observed. Stock's down another 8% this morning. Turn it off, Arielle decided. We have actual clients to focus on. As her team dispersed, Arielle continued down the hallway toward the conference room. The space that had once felt temporary, a placeholder until she figured out her next move, now hummed with purpose. Framed on the wall was the New York Times business section from February, Crisis Queen, How Arielle Monroe Became the Go-To Strategist for Corporate Redemption. Next to it hung a more recent Wall Street Journal profile, Monroe's Method, Transparency as the New Currency in Corporate Crisis. In the conference room, Julian stood before a whiteboard covered in flowcharts and bullet points. At 38, he carried his expertise with an understated confidence that Arielle had come to appreciate deeply. Today, he wore a navy suit with no tie, his dark hair slightly tousled from running his hands through it while thinking, a habit she had noticed early in their professional collaboration.
"Sorry I'm late," she said, setting down her portfolio on the polished conference table. "The Gibson team needed last-minute reassurance before their press conference." Julian turned, his expression warming. "They're lucky to have you. Not many strategists would take on a whistleblower case against a pharmaceutical giant." "It's the right thing to do," Arielle replied simply, "and strategically sound. The truth has a way of emerging eventually. Better to control the narrative from the beginning." Their eyes held for a moment longer than strictly necessary. Over the past 3 months, their relationship had evolved in careful increments, professional respect deepening into friendship, and friendship occasionally hinting at something more, but both carried their own histories of complicated entanglements, and neither was rushing toward definitions. Julian cleared his throat. "Before the others arrive, there is something you should know. Victor called my office this morning." Arielle stilled. "What did he want?" "To offer a settlement." He handed her a document. "He's finally willing to sign the divorce papers with the terms you originally proposed." Arielle scanned the document, her expression unreadable. "Why now? The SEC investigation is gaining momentum, not slowing down." "My guess? His board is pressuring him to contain the damage. A protracted, public divorce battle with the woman who knows where all the bodies are buried isn't helping their stock price." She set the papers down, a complex mixture of emotions washing over her. Not regret, not nostalgia, but something like vindication mingled with the faintest trace of sadness for what might have been in another life. "I'll sign today. It's time to close that chapter completely." Julian studied her face. "You okay?" She said, "Better than okay," and meant it. "I spent 4 years diminishing myself to fit into the space Victor allocated for me. Now I'm building something that's entirely mine." The door opened as the rest of the day's meeting participants began to file in, representatives from a tech company facing a data breach crisis, Julian's associate attorneys, and Arielle's growing team. As the room filled with purposeful energy, Julian leaned closer to Arielle. "Dinner tonight to celebrate the official end of the Langford era?" Arielle smiled, not the practiced, perfect smile she'd worn as Victor's wife, but something more genuine, with a hint of mischief. "I'd like that." The meeting progressed with the efficient rhythm they'd established over months of collaboration. Arielle led the strategy discussion, her natural authority evident in the way people leaned forward when she spoke. This was her element. Identifying vulnerabilities, crafting narratives, building paths to redemption for clients who deserved second chances. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan stretched out in all directions, the city that had witnessed her lowest moments, now the backdrop for her renaissance. Somewhere out there, Victor was likely in his own meeting, trying to salvage what remained of his empire. As the meeting concluded and people began gathering their materials, Arielle's phone chimed with a notification. It was a news alert. "Breaking, Langford Enterprises CEO steps down amid widening SEC probe." She showed the screen to Julian, who raised an eyebrow. "Looks like the board finally found their backbone. Or the federal investigators found something we didn't include in our evidence package," Arielle mused. Later, as the office emptied and the afternoon sun cast long shadows across Manhattan's grid, Arielle stood alone at the window of her private office. The space was still minimally decorated: a desk, ergonomic chair, and a single photograph. Arielle at age 12 with her mother, both laughing on a beach in Michigan. It was from before her mother's illness, before the scholarships that became her escape route,
before she'd learned to transform herself into whatever people needed her to be. A knock at the door drew her attention. Julian stood in the doorway, jacket slung over his shoulder. "Ready to go?" "Almost," she said. "Just needed a moment." He moved to stand beside her at the window. "Second thoughts?" "No," she said truthfully. "Just taking it all in. 6 months ago, I was trapped in a marriage that was slowly erasing me. Today, I'm running my own company, finalizing my divorce, and," she glanced at him, "figuring out what I actually want, maybe for the first time ever." Julian's hand found hers, his fingers intertwining with hers in that now familiar way. "And what is it that Arielle Monroe wants?" She turned to face him fully. "To build something meaningful, to help people who deserve second chances, to never again make myself smaller for someone else's comfort." She paused, her amber eyes meeting his dark ones. "And maybe to see where this goes, without rushing, without expectations." "I can work with that," Julian said softly. As they left the office together, Arielle's phone buzzed with another message. This one wasn't a news alert, but a text from her former assistant at Langford Enterprises. "He's cleared out his office. Word is he's headed for the Caymans tonight." Arielle showed Julian the message. "Should we alert the authorities?" Julian considered this. The SEC already has him under surveillance. If he's running, he won't get far. The elevator descended, carrying them down through the heart of the building toward the bustling street below. Arielle felt a curious lightness, as if the final weights of her past were lifting away. "You know," Julian said as they reached the lobby, "when this all started, I thought you were just looking for revenge." "Part of me was," Arielle admitted. "But revenge is a moment. This," she gestured between them, then outward to encompass everything beyond. "This is a future." Outside, New York continued its eternal forward motion, taxis honking, pedestrians hurrying, the rhythm of the city that never paused for anyone's personal drama. Arielle Monroe stepped into that flow, no longer as Victor Langford's carefully curated wife, but as herself, complex, capable, and finally, completely free. If Arielle's journey of self-discovery and redemption resonated with you, don't miss out on our upcoming stories of women reclaiming their power. Subscribe now and join our community of viewers who believe it's never too late to rewrite your own ending. Hit that notification bell to be the first to know when our next chapter drops. Stories of resilience that will inspire you to stand in your truth just like Arielle did. Your journey to self-empowerment is just beginning.